on the topic of marriage and abuse, something that has been happening quite prevalently in South Africa is child marriages.
Yeah.
And I mean, you hear about it and you're like, but it's not often something spoken about, mostly because it's protected by culture.
Yeah.
And once something's protected by culture, it's somewhat normalized, even if it violates human rights. And that would be, a man coercing a young girl into marrying him, and her family then giving him consent to remove her from the household. And not only does that cause psychological trauma, because she's not given the life that a normal child is supposed to have. She's given the life of a wife at, let's say, the age of 12 or 13 years old when she starts developing.
Sure.
And that's completely stripped from her. And she's also then, forced to be a mother and produce not only, the labor of a wife at such a young age, but also to have to carry a child when the body isn't specifically ready to carry a child just yet. And that causes complications, and not wanting to turn to, doctors for help can actually cause a death.
Yeah.
And also on topic of, younger girls being put through this bodily abuse leads me to a very serious topic. So let's go
Please
deep.
go ahead. Yeah, this is what we hear, right?
That topic is female genital mutilation. And just as child marriage isn't spoken about, which is actually actively being worked on by Ronald Lamola. So as soon as he gets the go-ahead to remove some of these practices, he'll do so. But still, female genital mutilation is not touched. Aside from the children getting exploited and the women through female genital mutilation, there's also sexual exploitation, which has become a major thing. I'm not sure if you guys have been reading, but last year there was a lot of kidnappings, a lot taking place, and it was
actually very alarming.
It's terrifying. Absolutely
within
terrifying.
the same age range.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, why is that? Because
Can't be
human
a coincidence.
trafficking is at its peak. Always been actually in South Africa, especially Pretoria and Johannesburg and Cape Town. And most of the time it is for sexual exploitation. So the girls are sold, they're used as slaves, sex slaves, they're used in clubs. So very prominent nightclubs in Cape Town would often use these girls to entertain their very wealthy guests. And you think, okay, the girls are loving working in this place, they look so happy, they get the flashy outfits, but it's sexual exploitation because they're doing it for the sake of money. And in the long run, their bodies are being completely objectified by men who will disregard them tomorrow if they have to, if someone better comes along that they can then exploit sexually. And it's also leaks into Instagram and influencing. So this isn't to say that all influencers do that. I mean, it is a trade for some. It's an amazing way to get yourself out there. And younger girls look up to that specifically, not knowing the dangers behind it. They go to big cities with dreams of becoming this. And that's how, we get these horrible murders. And the worst is some of these aren't even reported at the, with the root cause of it being female genital mutilation or sexual exploitation to protect people in positions. And that's the sad part about women, is that every time it feels like we're taking a few steps forward, we take a few steps back.
It's so important that we must continue to have these conversations because, like Zaylia is highlighting, these things are happening right under our noses. And, we've heard the term silence equals violence.
Yes.
So we need to be loud about it. We need to bring it to light and continue the conversation about how this is manifesting within our society and the dynamics that are at play so that women don't get constantly subjected to these forms of abuse.
Can I just branch out, speaking of masculinity, into, once again, an unknown form of toxic masculinity? And it all forms parts of a psychological disorder or effect that affects certain men, and that's called the Lolita effect. So if you know Lolita, it's a very controversial novel
Yeah.
and movie because it's about this really,
I remember the film. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about really.
Tell me more.
It's about an older man that pursues a woman simply to prey on her daughter. And that all stems from him losing the love of his life when he was around this little girl's age. And the little girl in question is Lolita. So with psychology, we've come to a point where we can actually call this type of act the Lolita effect. And it does happen a lot in our society,
We
which
see
once
that a
again,
lot, yeah.
once again ties in with female genital mutilation. So the girl is appealing if she doesn't exactly have body hair, and everything is still tight. She hasn't had sex before. She hasn't had a child before. So it's attractive to some men, and they would go for a girl based solely on that. Look, someone
Them being looking like a child.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
infantilizing
yes,
Yeah.
the child.
And the virgin,
the virgin birth.
Yes.
So someone who
Very
actually suffered from this is Elvis Presley. And a perfect example is the relationship that he had with Priscilla. So Priscilla was obviously much, much younger. And he idolized the fact that she was pure. And he idolized the fact that she hadn't been touched. And the moment they had Lisa Marie, he stopped sleeping with her.
Oh my goodness.
They tried, but it just wouldn't work. And
Sure.
he couldn't see her after that, as he did before.
Because she was damaged.
Because she was now damaged. And
Yeah.
when they got divorced, he was about 40 years old around his passing. He had a 14-year-old girlfriend simply because
Yikes.
of the Lolita effect.
Yeah.
And this is something that ties in with power. So men feel powerful when they're able to be at that age and have someone so young depend on them.
Yes.
So they feed her with, money and with anything she ever wanted, when in reality he only sees her as, a sexual fantasy to boost his ego and also to boost toxic masculinity within men.
And the ripple effect of that is that we then internalize that misogyny.
Yes.
We then want to fit the description of a child.
Yeah.
We then want to be appealing to our men who
Yes.
are attracted to
And
children.
we then judge
Yes.
other
And
women
we-
who,
And we
are
body
not-
shame.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we body shame ourselves, and then we body shame everybody involved that doesn't
Yeah.
look like a child.
Yes.
The male gaze, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think talking about the male gaze is so significant because I feel like any woman who's come of age has had a moment in their life where they've stood in the mirror naked probably and said, I hate what I see. What man is ever going to love this? What man
Yeah.
is going to want to touch me? Especially in that very, very fundamental age of, going into puberty, first getting pubic hair and underarm hair, your breast developing, you transitioning out of this childlike innocence into a woman, into a lady. And because of this, stereotype of women having to be clean shaven, no hair anywhere, fit and tight, and, fitting this model of Lolita, fulfilling the Lolita effect,
Yes.
we internalize that and then resent other women
Yeah.
who are then liberated. If you've seen another woman who haven't shaved their legs, and you see, the first thing you think is, oh damn,
Exactly.
you missed a week shaving, or like you missed your wax appointment. And then the second thing is, oh no, I shouldn't be saying that because what if that was me?
Yeah.
And I love to use the analogy, the first thing that you think is what you've been taught to think, and the second thing is what you think.
Yeah.
So it's very important for us as individuals, and continuing this conversation in our lives, is to recognize that even if you think that you are the wokest, most radical feminist, you will have those moments where you'll need to catch yourself and say, like, oh, let me check myself. Let me see where I'm thinking, where this is going, and how can I dismantle this male gaze within myself and project the positivity of being a grown adult woman onto other women.
Yeah.
And I think that counts for men as well, right? The personal responsibility that comes with that. As, educated on these issues as you may be, it's important to recognize how you yourself perpetuate these dynamics, even, in small interactions, microaggressions as well, in your own life. And, because we can talk about just even economic disenfranchisement as we have, and the economic disparities, but at the end of the day, as a woman, you might be higher on the ladder economically than a man. But what I find is, even just walking down the street, a man can still exert that power over you by catcalling you, or it's in these little interactions that toxic masculinity and misogyny also take place. And it's important for men to take that personal responsibility to unlearn those behaviors and to do better.
Yeah.